Okay, I'm going to call this village board meeting for August 20th, 2018 to order. Roll call, please.
Joe Zitzelsberger.
Here.
Sam Bollweg.
Here.
Sue Springman.
Here.
Bill Ranum.
Here.
Chris Zellner.
Here.
Phil Willems.
Here.
Aaron Moran.
Here.
Okay, first we have our confirmation of open meeting compliance. Julie?
Yes, I can confirm that the public postings were posted appropriately. Official notices were provided to the newspaper, and it was made available online last week.
Okay, thank you. Next, we've got consent agenda. Is there anything that anyone would like pulled from the board or look for a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Sam Bollick, second by Sue Springman. Any other comments? Call the question, all in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed, ayes have it. Public comment, is there anyone here that would like to address the board on an issue that's not on the agenda for this evening?
I have two. Ann Lewandowski.
Ann Lewandowski, 103 West 3rd Street. I am here to address the board on the housing study. It's on the agenda, but it's not here for a public hearing. And I'm hoping that you guys apply the same method of picking residents for the housing study that you applied for the other committees. And also to say that while I'm happy to see that a downtown resident specifically is being picked for that committee, I hope that you guys also consider the more inclusive strategy that was discussed at the previous board meeting and potentially look at expanding it to residents of all neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Nyla Fry.
Nyla Fry, 404 East Berlin Avenue. The Dane County Summit is Thursday, October 25th from 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. at the Alliance Energy Center. I hope an interested representative from Waunakee will attend. Todd can't attend since he is attending another meeting. It's the Dane County Housing Summit.
Okay. Any others, Julie, or is that everything?
No, that's it.
Okay, does anybody else have any public comments at the board? I have a letter that was sent to me by Paul Esser, from the mayor from Sun Prairie, Aaron Oppenheimer, the city administrator, Patrick Anhalt, police chief there, Chris Garrison, fire chief, Brian Goff, EMS chief. And it just reads, Dear President Zellner, we are writing to express the city of Sun Prairie's appreciation for the amazing response of the Waunakee Police Department, Fire Department, and EMS Department following the incident on Tuesday, July 10th, 2018. Your departments assisted our community in the days afterward. We cannot thank you, the village, and the residents of Waunakee enough for your assistance. Our community is fortunate to have partners such as your organization to assist us during difficult times. We also want to specifically mention the actions of your staff members, Chief Kevin Plendel, Chief Dave Cupp, and Director Scott Russell. These individuals displayed excellent leadership throughout the incident and assisted our community in managing this difficult situation. Thank you again for your commitment to assisting communities in need and for the service that was provided to our community. So I guess it was appropriate, or I don't know if it's appropriate, it's the right word, but our community was just having a situation of our own. I'd like to thank our police, fire, and EMS for all acting professionally and doing a wonderful job. And also to reassure the public that Waunakee is a very safe community, and hopefully this is an isolated incident that occurred, and obviously we don't want anything like that to happen again. But I will give kudos to our fire, EMS, and police, as well as Dane County for the assistance that they provided us. And then, speaking on behalf of the board, also the sympathy to the families. We extend our heartfelt, sincere sympathy to the family. Okay. Anything else on public comment? Okay, then I'm going to close that. Okay, we've got 4 public hearings for this evening. First, we've got discuss and take action on request from John Waller to rezone 4996 Gilkison Road, Town of Westport, from County Road 1 Residential District to Village R1 Single Family Residential District to construct a shed. Kevin?
Quick introduction. Like you said, it's a rezone from County R1 to Village R1. Really, the purpose of the rezone is so the applicant can build a 12-foot shed and not a 10-foot shed, which is restricted by county zoning. And it's been through the Joint Planning Commission. Our Planning Commission didn't take issue with it. So with that, I would, after the public hearing, I would suggest or recommend that you approve it consistent with what the town board did.
Okay. And I'll open up the public hearing for anyone who would like to address the board on this issue. Okay, then I will close the public hearing. Board members, any comments, questions, or look for a motion?
Well, my comment is, I know several people in that area, and they all have sheds of this size and garages, so I think it's fairly consistent. I'd recommend approval as recommended by the Joint Plan Commission and the town.
Okay, motion by Phil Williams. Second by Bill Random. Any other comments? Call the question, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got discuss and take action on request from Roger Wolter, Purple Cow Organics, to rezone 5935 County Highway K, Town of Westport, from County C1 Commercial District to Village C1 General Commercial District. Kevin?
Yeah, this property is in the city of Middleton, but it's isolated by the town. It's actually owned partially by the Village of Waunakee along with the city of Middleton and Sherwood Hills. It's our compost site. And saying the MR, the landfill district is contracted with Purple Cow in order for them to run our compost site. As part of this, they want to move their offices on site, so they need to complete this rezone in order to do it. We thought it was consistent with what's going on that site, and certainly are supportive. Again, the Joint Planning Commission and our Planning Commission recommended approval.
It's not on the MRD site.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's on Highway K. I'm sorry.
It was.
It's the old, yeah.
I'm like,
Thanks, Gene. It's the one that's been for sale for 10 years.
yes. Sorry.
Okay, so then, I'll open up the public hearing for this item for anybody who'd like to speak.
Chris, I have, Nyla indicated that she wanted to speak during public hearing, but I don't know which item.
I already did.
Oh,
I'm
under
sorry.
public comment?
I marked the wrong thing.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
Julie, I think there was one that was passed out on this, wasn't there?
Yeah, Jean, she's available for questions.
I am one of the owners and CEO of Purple Cow Organics, so I'm here available if there are any questions.
okay, then I'm gonna close the public hearing. Board members, any comments? Otherwise, look for a motion.
No, Roger Walter's been running a Sunline apparel business out of there. They've been shipping and receiving stuff from there for years. I think this is gonna be lighter use of the property than it's been, so I would recommend approval by the town and Joint Planning Commission.
Okay, motion by Phil Williams. Do we have a second? Second by Aaron Moran. Any other comments? Call the question, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got discuss and take action on certified survey map and rezone request for Brandon Andrews for vacant lot adjacent to 5152 River Road, Town of Westport, from County A1 X Agriculture District to Village CR5 AC Countryside Residential District.
This is currently a single lot on River Road near Country Day School. And what they're proposing to do is split it into two lots. There was pretty active discussion at the Joint Planning Commission with the neighbors to try and resolve some of their issues, which I think they did, at least to the satisfaction of the town board and the Joint Planning Commission. So with that, after the public hearing, same thing, approve it subject to the same conditions as the town board and Joint Planning Commission.
Okay, then I'll open up the public hearing for anyone who would like to address the board on this issue. Okay, then I'll close the public hearing. Any comments from any of the board members? Or questions? Is this on the Westport's agenda for this evening as well? The towns?
They've already approved it.
They've already approved it? Okay. Maybe this is more of a Westport issue than a Waunakee issue, so. So the motion you're looking for is to approve,
Approve the rezone and certified survey map consistent with the Joint Planning Commission action.
So moved.
okay, motion by Sue Springman,
Second.
second by Sam Ballwig. Any other comments? Call the question, all in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got discuss and take action on certified survey map for Stephen and Ronald Kelcher, 5511 Easy Street, Town of Westport.
This is a single lot CSM. In essence, they're breaking out the house from the farmland. We've seen many of these over the last couple of years where they separate the residents from the actual farmland. Again, initially they wanted to add another lot, but Westport had previously, when they got a split, they were deed restricted in terms of no more splits for that particular property without the approval from the town board. And so the town said no on the additional house. And so what they're recommending, or what we're recommending approval, and what the Joint Planning Commission and Town Board did, just split the one lot CSM away from the farmland.
Okay, then I will open the public hearing. Is there anybody who would like to address the board on this issue? Okay, I think I made eye contact with just about everybody. We'll close the public hearing. Comments from the board members or a motion?
I make the motion to approve the certified survey map for Stephen Ronald Culture.
Second.
Motion by Sam Bowick, second by Phil Willems. Any other comments? Call the question, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we have licenses and permits. Discuss and take action on operator license application for Laura Strong, Marcy Stallman, Bonita Carey, Erica Orliski, Stephanie Hayman, and Jonah Ryan. Julie?
The applications in your packet have been reviewed by the police department and staff, subject to our policy for operator license approval. All have been recommended for approval by you, subject to successful completion of a responsible beverage server training course.
Okay, do we have any questions or a motion?
I guess I have a question about the one for Ms. Strong. She's got a lot of yeses for arrests in the last 7 years. Is that still gonna be an approval thing?
Let me just get to hers.
Got pending charges, convictions, arrests.
Based on our application and our policy, we can't deny them one on something that hasn't been decided yet. So should it come back later, we could act appropriately to further deny the application, but at this time, the police department has not come back with a definitive denial. So we would ask that it also be subject to final review by the police.
With that being said, I would approve the operator licenses for the aforementioned people, subject to the successful completion of the approved responsible beverage server training course and review by the Waunakee Police Department.
Second.
Motion by Phil Willems, second by Joe Zitzelberger. Any other comments, or I'll call the question? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got new business, and before we start this section, I'd like to reorder this. We have a closed session item that's number 5 that I'd like to move down under old business number 2. So we'll handle those both at the end of the meeting. Okay? First item we have is discuss and take action on banking bid proposals. Renee, are you?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll speak to that. So, we had done an RFP for banking services back in June. The proposals were due in July. And then myself and what I call the Banking Proposal Task Force, which was made up of former citizen members of the Finance Committee that are no longer on that committee because it's only board members now, but they still act as citizen advisors to the committee. And so that was Dennis Swino, Jim Elvacrogue, and Al Dasso helped review the proposals. And so I'm not going to go into detail on all. We sent it out to all 8 banking institutions within the Village of Waunakee. That's one of our requirements, is you have to be within the village limits. We received 7 proposals back out of the 8, and those were what were evaluated. And so the task force recommended Old National to the Finance Committee. We just had a Finance Committee meeting where this was discussed, but Old National, they met all the requirements that qualified them to propose. They met all the other requirements within the proposal, and so out of the 4 banks that met those requirements, they had the highest interest rate. which will result in an increase for the village. So we currently had a 0.2% interest rate. Now we will have a 1.75%, or that's what they're proposing. So that'll, assuming all the deposit levels are the same, that'll net us about $95,000 extra per year. We've had a very good relationship with Old National, and had very good response from their local people and their, help desk and everybody. So all of that factored into our recommendation to the Finance Committee. And then the Finance Committee, I'm assuming I say what
The
result of that-
recommendation?
Yeah, so the Finance Committee approved recommending Old National to the board. But if there's any questions.
Sue, do you want to say anything as chair?
We have a 3-year term, right, with options to extend, but we also talked about putting a group together and looking at our criteria, our investment, our policies, and seeing if there might be some changes in the future. I think.
And
most likely.
Sam did abstain from
Yes.
voting, even though he is on the committee, because of a conflict being on one of the bank's boards.
And I think it makes sense to review some of our policies. Is the last time we changed anything was 2009?
9.
I believe so.
So the RFP was very similar to the one from 2009. And there's been some changes, obviously, in banking, as well as the fact that we waited that long. We maybe could have had a better interest rate. Sam pointed it out after the fact, since he couldn't really participate. But it's a 3-year term, which can be acceptable. I think it was too long since we did it the last time, so we probably missed some interest. But to be very clear with what Renee said, yes, there is the dollar amount that was stated. I think there's around 100 and some thousand of interest. That's based on current deposits that are
Right.
happening, and our deposits are very high right now because of the library borrowings and other things, so that may not be, don't look at that as, that's what the number is going to be in the budget future.
Right, we have a lot of money in our checking currently to pay all the library bills as they come due. We have to stay fairly liquid with that, so our balances are probably a bit higher the past year and a half or so with those borrowings than they would necessarily be in the future.
Nonetheless, it will be a better interest rate for us.
Right.
Okay, so then I look for a motion.
I'd move approval of the banking proposal.
Motion by Sue Springman,
Second.
second by Phil Willems. Any other comments or questions from board members? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Ayes have it.
Should I abstain from that, I assume?
Yes.
Renee, or caught that, I abstain from that vote.
Oh. Sam, abstained.
Yep, got it.
Okay, next we've got discuss and take action on Meadowbrook Park shelter bids. Sue, are you gonna introduce this, or
Either Phil or I can.
Phil?
Yeah, we met with the park committee on this, and this is our second go-around on this. The other time, we only had, one? And so we pulled it back and repeated the process. And when we first got this and looked at it, I was a little apprehensive. But then, in looking it over, this company kind of hit all their bids right in line, even though they were so much lower than others, that it scared me. Then after I looked at it, I could see that they just did a better job of bidding the contract. So, based on what the Parks Committee's people said, I would make a motion, we approve the contract with Iconica for the construction of the Meadowbrook Park Shelter.
Okay, motion by Phil Willems,
Second.
second by Sue Springman. Sue, can you point out to everybody that bidding process? We did go out to bid once, and it was during a very heavy bidding time, or heavy busy season for construction. What was the difference between what that bid was to what we went to now?
For sure. We actually did not make any substantive changes in the park shelter design. We mostly adjusted the process that we took to bid the project. So a couple different things that we learned. First of all, we reached out to quite a few contractors and asked them why they did not bid the first time. In the spring, everybody was very busy. If you remember, it was rainy and people were behind in the work that they already had. We bid. There's a process where you have to advertise 2 weeks, and then you can open bids 1 week later, and we stacked it. We advertised, and then opened bids. Many contractors told us they just didn't have time to respond. So the second time around, we advertised, waited 3 full weeks before we opened bids, so we gave contractors a much better window to put their numbers together. We also worked incredibly hard to reach out to contractors to make sure that they understood that the project was out for bids, to encourage them to submit. Instead of receiving 1 bid as we did the first time, we had 9 the second time around. We also extended the construction period. So the original bid indicated that the shelter needed to be completed by fall of this year. And this time around, we opened up the construction period to actually a completion date of not to exceed July 1st of next year. So the contractors had an opportunity to potentially begin building yet this fall, once all the contracts are secured, or wait until spring, whatever worked better for their business plan. And we feel that those 3 steps really made the difference. The reduction in the bid was $120,000 from the first time around to the second time around. So right in line with what we were anticipating for the cost of the shelter. And just a bit of information about the funding for the shelter. The majority of the funding for this project is coming from impact fees that were paid, the majority of those fees paid by the residents that live in the Meadowbrook neighborhood. So this is something that's been a long time coming in the park plan for the residents that live in that neighborhood. Will be able to use this park shelter.
Thank you. Okay, so that was my only comment. Any other comments? Okay, we have our motion. Who was our motion in second? Phil was our motion. Second was?
It was Phil and Sue.
And Sue. So I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, next we've got discuss and take action on dark store legislation campaign funding request. Todd?
The village received a letter from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, of which, remember, we have been for a long time. They're taking on a significant lobbying campaign on a topic called the dark store loophole. Of all the League emails that I forward to you guys, you've probably seen this routinely. In fact, about a year ago, the village passed a resolution supporting closure of the loopholes because of its impact. And what I'd like to do, the League just published a YouTube video that in 4 minutes does a really nice job of outlining the impact, the reason, and what this campaign is about and why we should address it. After you view this, as was requested in the letter from the League, they're seeking additional contribution from all their member communities. They're seeking $1,200 additionally to the $75,000 that they're already taking out of their own reserves to pursue this legislative campaign. So that's what we're seeking approval from you on, is to fund that $1,200. So I'm going to bring this up here. Hopefully all my devices and widgets here do what they're supposed to do.
If there are big box or other chain retailers in your community, your property taxes may be going up. That's because certain commercial properties have been able to obtain special tax reductions. Perhaps you've heard of these tax breaks. They're known as the dark store and Walgreens loopholes. Unless the state legislature closes these loopholes, other property owners, including homeowners, will pay an average of 8% more in property taxes. Even more in some communities. Communities like the town of Grand Chute, Ashwaubenon, Sheboygan, West Bend, Franklin, Pleasant Prairie, Sun Prairie, La Crosse, and Rice Lake. You see, the total amount of property taxes a local government may collect is strictly limited by state law. The size of the property tax pie stays pretty much the same from one year to the next. What can and does change is how the pie gets divided when one kind of property, like big box stores, pays less, other kinds, like residential and mom-and-pop businesses, pay more. Let's take a closer look at the dark store loophole. Attorneys for big box chains claim that a brand new store in a busy area has the same value for tax purposes as a vacant, boarded up, dark property located in an unpopular location. Here's an actual example. A Lowe's store in Wauwatosa is assessed for taxes at $13.6 million. Lowe's claims it's only worth $7.1 million. Yet Lowe's spent in excess of $16 million to acquire the land and build the structure. Lowe's argues that even the land was devalued from $9 million to $3 million once the big box store was constructed. And Lowe's insists its store can only be compared to vacant dark stores for property tax purposes. Ironically, as big box stores fight for a smaller share of property taxes, they use more municipal services. Big box stores demand more police, fire, and ambulance service than other commercial properties, and way more than residential properties. Every day, municipal police, fire, and ambulance respond to calls from big box stores. Meanwhile, the cost of paying for these services gets shifted to homeowners, the class of property using these services the least. The other loophole is called Walgreens after a 2008 Wisconsin Supreme Court decision. That ruling allows national pharmacies and other businesses who lease their store to claim the value of their properties, for tax purposes, is less than half of the actual sale price. Here's another real example. Walgreens challenged the city of Oshkosh's assessment of its store. The Court of Appeals, relying on the 2008 decision, decided that the value of the Walgreens property was $2.2 million, much less than the $4.3 million actual 2009 sale price of the property. Other taxpayers, mainly homeowners, now have to cover Walgreens' former share of the taxes. Plus, Oshkosh taxpayers had to pay the corporation a tax refund of $69,500. Nearly 300 pharmacies in Wisconsin can take advantage of this loophole, including stores in Ashland, Onalaska, Dodgeville, Beaver Dam, Weston, Appleton, and Sturgeon Bay, and in your neighborhood. Other commercial and manufacturing businesses that lease their space are also beginning to use this same loophole. Only the Wisconsin State Legislature can stop this unfair tax shift. Tell your state legislators to restore fairness and common sense to the property tax system by closing the dark store and Walgreens loopholes. Call your state legislator through the legislative hotline at 1-800-362-9472 or visit darkstoreloopholes.org.
Coincidentally, TrueScribe is a company that's in Fitchburg. I'm actually working with them right now to do an economic development type whiteboard video to add to our repertoire of economic development information. So that's the story behind Dark Store. Kind of doesn't leave many questions left to ask, except I would say that certainly the Walgreens and Menards and Lowe's of the world have their attorneys that are lobbying this staunchly at the state level too. They probably have their share of efforts and materials out there to argue their side of the story, but we certainly believe that elimination of these loopholes is an important balancing proposal for the majority of our taxpayers. So with that, what we're seeking is approval to allocate $1,200 of funding. The source we're suggesting is the insurance dividend check that we received from League Mutual Insurance this year, which was in excess of $39,000. So it was an unbudgeted revenue. This was an unbudgeted expense, and that's the source that we're seeking approval for funding the $1,200.
Was this on the agenda at the meetings you were just at? Did they talk about it at all?
Yeah, quite a bit.
And where is it currently at with the legislature?
The state legislature formed a study committee of 15 or so people across the gamut of areas of interest. Municipal folks, along with representatives from Walgreens themselves, are on this task force, this study group. And they held their first meeting, I believe it was 2 weeks ago. And they're going to have a series of additional meetings and testimony to be heard. And that group, I believe, is going to be putting forward recommended options to the legislature this coming session. It was all the way up to prepped and ready for floor action, but at the very last minute, actually the bill author pulled the loophole legislation because there were modifications made at both levels of the House that essentially weakened the bill and in fact made it more destructive to assessment practices for local communities. So he himself pulled it because of how it had been modified.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Todd? It's a deep issue throughout the state right now. Hot topic within all the meetings that we attend.
In other states as well.
Yes.
There's a couple states that have taken action already to eliminate this assessment practice.
And it was nice to have our dividend check come in from our insurance to help cover this expense. So I'm going to make the motion to approve the $1,200 expense.
And I'm gonna second it, because pretty soon these people are gonna ask for fare. We need it too.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. Do we have any other comments? Okay, I'll call it to question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Yep.
Discuss and take action to create Waunakee Housing Task Force. So, I met with staff and reps from UW, including Kristen Runge, and I think I saw Kristen, there you are, a couple weeks ago, I guess, at this point. The village board is asked to take action on 3 specific items at this time. And that is to identify the tasks to be completed by the task force, identify the composition of the task force, not yet appoint specific community members, and assign village administration to take necessary steps to coordinate and complete the study by providing staff support and guidance to the task force and UW Extension consultant team. So Todd is, I'm going to defer to you as well as to Kristen to kind of introduce and talk about
Sure.
some of our steps.
Yep, and Chris and I can tag team where I fail, you can help out. So the first, and certainly room for, this is before the village board in draft form. Understand that if you see need for change or modification to what we're proposing, please, let's discuss that here tonight. But the first thing is, whenever you create a task force, you want to give that group a task, which and with the intent that they reach completion of it. This is the task that we've designed for you to consider. The village board has created the Waunakee Housing Task Force to gain a full understanding of the existing housing inventory in Waunakee, identify areas of realistic housing need in which the Waunakee housing marketplace ought provide supply, and craft potential policy modifications for consideration by the Plan Commission to address the identified needs. So obviously that means the process starts at the Plan Commission. If changes to housing, zoning, policy is recommended, it would start there. Eventually, it would be brought forward to the village board. So that is the design of the task. And maybe before I jump past that, Chris or Kristen, Kevin was in that staff meeting, Julie was as well. Are there any additional thoughts behind our reasoning for crafting the task like we did? Or are there questions from the board that we can try to address?
I will mention that one of the things that we discussed extensively when we all sat down together was how to make the task force membership representative of the community so that all of those from different wards, from different backgrounds, from different genders, ethnicities, and whatnot would be included and feel that the decision and the recommendations that were arrived, this is not a decision-making body, would be representative of everyone's concerns in the community. And they're very thoughtful in doing that, Todd and Kevin were. So.
And I'd like to go over that. I've got the list actually up here, but before we jump to that, which we can if you want to, I just want to make sure that we are on target with the recommended task language.
Or do any board members have anything they'd like to add or delete from that message?
which section in here gives us the deliverable? Read through this, I mean, what we're gonna get.
Well, maybe Kristen can talk to that. Sue's asking about essentially what the product is gonna look like.
What you'll
Sue?
have in your hands at the end of the process. Yeah, so it'll be a combination of a set of minutes that'll have been kept throughout the whole process. And that will be in the back end. The front end will be a set of recommendations that summarizes all of the different issues that the task force was charged with discussing, a brief summary of the evidence that was brought by the different experts from UW-Madison that we're bringing in and from around the different universities across the state, and then the rationale behind any recommendations that are going to be made based on that information. So it'll be, in short, it will be a readable report.
Any other comments, questions?
We can circle back if needed, Chris, to this. Why don't I go through the task force composition? That, again, we're recommending and are open to modifications if you feel necessary. So, So Ann's points that she mentioned earlier in her public comments were appropriate and relevant here. We believed in attempting to do essentially a lot of things that she had suggested. Now, I would note that at our discussion a month or so ago, numbers like 200 people on the task force were floated around. From a managing the process perspective, in terms of a decision-making and recommending body, that's not a feasible design. Although what we want to make certain that the public is aware of is if anyone who is not on the task force is going to be given an opportunity to engage in the process by providing feedback. I don't know whether it's going to be focus groups or surveys or attendance at meetings or a combination of all three, but there will be an opportunity for every individual in the village who wants to have a say and take part in the process to be there and see this work and actually provide input in the process. But to get it down to the group that will be asked to manage the task at hand, this is the makeup that we're recommending. As far as process goes, Chris, as with typical with task forces and committees, the village president will be recommending the appointments to the village board, and the village board's task will be to ratify that recommended group of appointments. So that would be a subsequent meeting of the board. As far as village board representation, the recommendation is for Chris to serve and to serve as the village president to serve as the chairperson. We've also recommended that trustee Moran be a village board appointment as well. We're glad that she already checked with her schedule. She has a Thursday class, but her professor is willing to work with her on that. We also recommended trustee Moran in that she represents multiple groups that we also identify in here as having particular interest in this particular issue. Central downtown resident, someone representing the Millennial Task Force, and someone who's grown up in Waunakee and cares to stay here, at least for the near future, hopefully longer. So that's why we recommended trustee Moran. In addition, a plan commissioner, a citizen member of the plan commission is recommended. Appointment from the school district administration, certainly with a nod to understanding of the housing demands placed upon a school district and the impact of that. Chamber of Commerce and local employers. So we're looking for somebody specifically representing the chamber at large, and then someone representing a large employer in the community. I would certainly be looking to one of the large manufacturing companies, industrial companies in our business park would likely be appropriate. Someone representing the Waunakee Neighborhood Connection and suitable for to help with the population that they serve and their interests. Someone from the Waunakee Senior Center, a homeowner in the historic downtown center, a current renter or tenant in the village, a local builder or developer, a real estate professional, and here in particular, we're looking at someone who specializes in single-family residential, and then a party who specializes in multifamily. Residential mortgage lending professional, members of the youth, one female, one male, grades 9 to 12, so two members representing the youth, a millennial resident, and then 0 to 4 residents at large. So we designed this to be a committee of 17 to 21 people total. If everybody besides the resident at large, if that group, that's 17 people, if that group is able to accomplish geographic representation along with demographic representation of the village, then we might see fit to consider that a sufficient representative group. If not, and we need to fill in some areas of gap based on what we might be missing, there we have room to play with the 0 to 4 residents at large. Now, what I can point out, well, why don't I stop there a moment? We do have some recommended solutions to addressing the geographic representation issue, and that's by requiring that every ward within the village be represented. And we have a process to allow an applicant to identify their ward, or obviously through addresses we can confirm that. But that would be a goal of ours, to have ward representation. We have 12 wards. So why don't I stop there and open up the discussion regarding representation and get your feedback on that. And certainly, Kristen, Chris, others in the group, feel free to chime in as well.
I'm curious if there was a reason that emergency services is not on this list?
I don't think there was a particular reason why we did or didn't.
I'd kind of like to see something there. I mean, as the community grows, there's certainly more stresses and things on their services. So I think they have something to bring to the table.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to look to consensus from the board on adding that position.
Do you see any issues with that?
No. I recall us discussing it.
It was a brief thing, right?
Yeah, I sent it to you too, I don't remember.
We started out with a big giant dry erase board of lots and lots of people. We tried to work towards what we felt would be a suitable, manageable group size for Kristen and her colleagues to work with.
Are you requesting one from each?
No.
Are you requesting one to represent?
And in fact, that's why I phrased it as emergency services. I think any representative from any of those areas could represent the needs of the whole group.
So there's two areas you have to, or I would look at with that. One is a paid person, the others are volunteers in general. So you've got that dynamic of it as well.
True.
Not all paid in the other ones. I guess we do have a couple paid.
I think you're gonna get the same reaction from the paid. In terms of housing, it's not gonna matter whether they're paid or not paid.
They're going to have the same
They're gonna have the
sort
same
of
perspective.
philosophy. So the option in that could be to add that identifier in here and then reduce the at-large appointments to 0 to 3.
What can I ask on the question? I mean, we've had this discussion that there is a big demand put on fire and EMS as the population grows, and particularly some populations over other populations. Is that even part of this study? Because I still don't really know what we're getting in the study. I don't quite understand it, but that's probably my problem, but I'm still trying to, it's not, I mean, the housing issue of affordability is a huge subject of many components. This is just one really small area. I don't think we're getting into that issue. Are we?
I think, as with any issue in a community of this size, probably having somebody from emergency services on the committee is a better safe than sorry. Unless we make recommendations that would tax the emergency services and being aware that we're making recommendations that are beyond their capacities. So.
But I think, Sue, you were also asking how deep are we going to get into matter of affordability? Or did Kristen's answer suffice? Because I do think they are anticipating ample time on the subject of,
They want to define,
Yeah.
create a definition of affordability, look at
Yes.
what we currently have,
Yeah.
define how that fits within those definitions. And then when you look at demand, I'm not exactly sure affordability to me is infinite demand, because everybody wants affordability in housing, but what can we do to promote more affordability?
And it's an abstract term to a certain extent. It's depending on which perspective you're coming from, it means something different to everybody. So oftentimes the way that we approach it is for who is the community affordable, and then looking at that group, saying now who is missing from our larger community. If we're looking at who's in our school district, who's in our geographic region, who is in the community, who is excluded from the community by necessity of how much it costs to either rent or to own a home here. So and that doesn't give, unfortunately, it never really gives a concrete single definition of affordability, because that will change from year to year depending on the economy, what's for sale, what market prices are doing for houses and rents.
Recommending solutions on how you create that affordability?
We can look at different models of how other communities have created affordability, and there we're getting into some, in certain instances, some pretty extensive policy decisions that a community approaches, generally speaking, over a longer period of time. Do we start a nonprofit corporation that purchases land? And yeah,
money.
yeah, yeah.
So the question on that is, I only see a single family, residential mortgage lending professional versus a multifamily lending professional. Those are two different lending professionals in terms of their knowledge base on how deals get put together and how they work. And I think that's a big gap, because we're talking a lot about multifamily. Single family is one component, multifamily is another. They're very different.
So we have one from each.
I think you don't.
Yes, there's two listed there for real estate.
Real estate sales.
One single, one multi.
below
No,
Or a real
residential
estate
mortgage
professional.
lending.
Oh, resident, I gotcha.
A real estate professional, I don't even really know are you talking about sales? I'm more interested in the mortgage lending end of it, the economic end of it, because people don't understand the economics of it. It's an economic issue in the end, and a policy issue. But I think that's a gap. I don't know who the multifamily well, I suppose they can we don't have that many of them in this community is the problem.
Yeah, so one of the alternatives that we can have is we can bring in as one of the experts a commercial lending professional that can talk about the different models for financing multifamily. They may not be,
I
yeah.
think it's important to understand.
Because, yeah. Exactly.
I would add, you mentioned that there might not be tons of people who fit in some of these particular categories. We'd be asking the community in general, and then the village board as well, tap shoulders of folks in the community who you think are the right people, and have them apply. And I'll talk about the application process in a moment.
Any others that people feel should be included that are not at this time? Okay.
Do I hear a desire to have, again, I'm looking for consensus from the board as we design this, two professionals under the mortgage lending, one being typical single-family lender.
Well, no, as long as you bring somebody in to discuss it, because most of the financing mechanisms for affordability are multifamily. So you need to know that.
Okay.
I would agree with somebody from emergency services.
Okay, so we'd add emergency services rep. So then my suggestion would be to modify residents at large to 1 to 3. The reason I do that is we'd sit at 20. If we don't have an at large, we're looking to ensure an odd number in the process. If by chance there's an unusual tie vote in the scenario, so 1 to 3 residents at large plus an emergency services rep, along with what you see up here. I guess that would be the action that you'd be eventually asked to take here tonight.
Okay.
With that, I'd like to just, did you want to, did you want to see if there was any public questions or comments as part of this or at the end?
I think we'll do that at the end.
Okay.
And I got one other question here. Is there a, I guess, an intent to have each person only fill one of those roles? Or is it possible, kind of where you were going with the lending, you know, the commercial lending, could somebody fill multiple roles there? And if that's the case, maybe we want to, instead of going 1 to 3 on the extra people, keep it at 0 to 4 or whatever, and just specify that we're looking for an odd number.
That makes sense. Let's say we'll ensure that we'll have a group between 17 and 21.
Yeah.
So if someone does come in covering multiple categories and we can crack a bunch of nuts at the same time,
Yep.
then maybe we can get creative with other applicants.
Excellent.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
So what I want to show, and this is live on our website now, as of this afternoon. Thank you, Julie and staff. Let's see. We have a. Can I zoom in on this? There we go. We have a form up on the website that we will link in our social media. I assume that the Tribune will help promote this information, but we will on our social media essentially advertise the availability of interested parties to come in and fill out this form, which asks for name. My name popped up because there's a process of having an account under our website system under Civic Plus to submit this information. Nyla, don't worry, there will be an option for those who don't have access. When they go and express interest, there will be a spot to identify their ward up there at the top. Zoom in a little bit more. And then, boy oh boy, identify their ward and then identify what category they fit, and they would be asked to select all that apply. What the? And then there's two squares here, one that asks for background, related experience, what qualifies you within that category, and then generally, why are you interested? So this tool would be used to submit interest online. This would be the most efficient and helpful way. For those that don't have access to the internet, directly calling Julie and her staff would be the approach. So call Village Hall, and then they will take the step of entering that information within the form to then put that person into the process. I believe some citizens have already contacted us with interest. I don't know if you want them to resubmit, or we're just going to work with them and maybe follow up if needed.
Well, we can follow up with them. We don't have, most of this material was not provided to us when they reached out to us, so it probably wouldn't hurt if you've already applied to go online and apply, or you can stop at the front desk and we have a paper application that you can.
For those who are interested, I want to touch on some logistics related to the position and things that you should keep in mind as you work to make that decision. And that's that. This is a little small, but I'll just touch on this. We're expecting approximately 9 meetings once a month for 9 months. Village Center, lower level, starting at 5:30 and lasting at least 90 minutes up to likely 120 minutes. Do you want to? A lot of times people's attention sticks for about an hour, but Kristen, do you want to touch on why a 2-hour length is important?
So in each meeting, we're going to be bringing in a different expert, somebody who has published or done extensive work in one of the aspects of housing that we're dealing with as a community. That person will talk from about 40 to 45 minutes in a kind of a conversational, open style, and then after that, the group will, led by Sharon Lesberg, who is a master facilitator, will discuss what has been presented and how it's relevant to the community of Waunakee, the charge that's been issued the task force, and the decisions that the board might be asked to make. And so that's the process that it'll take. It will be a lively 120 minutes, we think, an engaging 120 minutes when we go that long, but it is a time commitment. It's not a 15-minute meeting or a 30-minute meeting and then we're gone.
I would note that we're going to video record all the meetings and publish them on our YouTube channel. Every meeting of the task force is, by virtue of the fact that the village board created this organization, they have to follow the same rules for open meetings as does the board. So there'll be posted meeting notices and agendas posted. All those things will be part of the process, along with the availability of the general public to attend. Thursday evenings, the first being on the 20th. The second Thursday of each month thereafter will be the rest of the routine. We've talked with Sue. We do have a child care facility at the Village Center, and we're willing to provide care so as to not prevent a barrier at, as I understand it, a modest cost per child. Anybody who is in that situation is welcome to contact us, and we'll provide those details. Deadline for submittal is noon on Wednesday, August 29th. The village president would then recommend those appointments at the meeting on Tuesday, September 4th. And then shortly thereafter, the work would commence on September 20th with the first meeting of the task force. So again, you've got 3 action items requested of you, and certainly we can take more time as necessary to answer questions.
So I'm going to open up, if people want to make comments to us in regards to this from whoever's here this evening, we're happy to hear. Just if you could just state your name and address so we have it on the camera.
Linda Ashmore, 114 South Street. So one of the questions I have as we're talking about bringing other people in, is there a residence requirement? Do you have to be a Waunakee citizen to be on this committee?
The 17 to 21 have to be residents.
Yes.
The citizens at large, you've got the high school, you've got seniors. What about middle-aged folks like me? Is there any consideration of that?
My guess is it'll be reflected in, that demographic is likely going to be reflected in the other appointments. But we reserve those at-large positions. If we don't see that demographic there or a demographic missing, we can supplement with the at-large positions.
The point being the age spread as well.
Age
as-
demographic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
And it kind of feels to me, and I kind of go back to what you were saying, Sue, like, what is the deliverable going to really deliver? So is it that you're going to come up with a recommendation to come up with affordable housing, or is this a recommendation about all of Waunakee housing?
Yes and yes. I think the affordable housing is probably the issue that gives most of us the most pause, because it's one of the most important issues facing almost all of the communities in Dane County right now. And so we approach that in a very thoughtful way, and in consideration of what is it that's been happening in the community, what is it that's happening in the region at large. Our third official meeting, our second meeting with experts, we'll bring in Dan Verhoff from the Applied Population Lab at UW-Madison, and he's planning on talking about the demographic changes and how they are or not, in the larger Dane County area, they are or are not reflected in that. That's a lot of where our discussion about affordable housing will actually begin that night, because we'll be looking at how Waunakee either does or does not reflect the larger community that we operate in. So from that point, there isn't necessarily a single predetermined question about affordability, because there'll be many questions that we'll be addressing and many questions that the task force will be coming in, undoubtedly many questions that the village board will have for us to answer. But that is one of the central issues that we'll be talking about over that 9-month period.
Okay, any other comments?
Ann Lewandowski, 103 West 3rd Street. How frequently does this committee interact with the village board? Is it sort of one and done at the very end, or do they hear kind of ongoing reports? How is that going to work?
The design as a task force indicates that it's not standing. In other words, once the task is accomplished, they end their work. Task finished.
I think what she's asking is, as we're going through the 9 months, are we giving a report to the board or to the public as we're going through that process?
Oh, I see.
Some sort of updates. Is that a common thing, Kristen?
Typically not, and simply because we're dealing this with the process, one aspect of the issue at a time, and so it works best to have all of the information presented to the task force, and they get a time period at the end of the presentations to really reflect on everything that they've heard. So they'll be hearing the way that it's structured. about issues, and then the last section of it, they'll be talking about solutions to those issues. So it won't be a process in which we're hearing about affordable housing in November, and we discuss affordable housing, and then it never comes up again. This is all designed to really build capacity, and it's a learning experience for the task force along with a discussion process. So they will not have until that last few months really all of the information they need to make a strong decision based on all of the data related to Waunakee.
I guess I would still say that I understand what you're saying, which is that the citizen members do not have the information at each individual point, but it sounds like perhaps the board might still be interested in some of the input in hearing what those citizen members are saying as the process moves forward. I mean, that's just me, but, that doesn't seem to be the process, so I'll stop there.
Board members aren't prohibited from attending with the video recording of the meetings and the minutes taken. All those materials will be, we'll actually try to force feed them to the Plan Commission and members of the board and really urge their engagement in the process. And hopefully attend some of the sessions to see how it's working. There may be actually particular topics on the upcoming agenda that are going to be more relevant to what your concerns are than others, and you can pick and choose.
It's not a closed off or walled process. I'm already in, and Sharon, who's my co-facilitator, in regular communication with Todd and Kevin and Chris, and we're discussing and figuring this out. And happy to answer questions. And if we're called to the village board to make a presentation, mid-process or early process, or at any point in time, it's an open process. It's not a closed process. The more the information we can get, the better.
So knowing what citizens are saying, that would be captured in the minutes of a meeting if there's a public.
It's gonna be captured in minutes,
So all of that would be public
video,
at the time that we can
everything.
read. Is that right?
Yeah, it's gonna be minutes, video, everything.
All right.
They'll be there. You had your hand up first.
I was just gonna say, didn't I hear a comment that everything was going to be videotaped? Maria Pat, 1000 Wexford Drive, and that throughout the process, people could be watching these videos to see what's going on.
Yeah, so important to know, there's gonna be the people that are on this committee or task force. Everybody else is welcome to come to the meetings, and there'll be opportunities for those people to give input to the task members. That's an important part of this. So if we do have 200 people there, that's okay, and we'll be wanting to get input from them. But everything will be videoed and available to the public at all times, basically.
Will,
Jerry?
Jerry Tierney, 3564 Egger Road, New Forest. The question is that there's a big list, and I'm sure most of them would be, but for example, the multifamily lending professional, if there isn't one that volunteers that's within the city limits, I mean, is that, or the village limits, I'm sorry, is that a hard rule that you're sticking with, or will you reach out, if nobody applies within the village, will you reach out to the neighboring community?
Nobody applies. My intent would be for us to reach out to some here locally and see if they would be willing to. So actively engage the local.
Most of the banks have branches all over the Dane County, so they'd have somebody within Dane County who,
they may not have it from Waunakee, with
Yeah,
Jerry
we don't
saying.
fund that. We don't fund that many multifamily, so.
Yeah.
Can I clarify that, so the multifamily mortgage lending professional could possibly not be a Waunakee resident? Because I'm concerned that we're Waunakee taxpayers, it's our Waunakee community, that it's residents that make up this. I mean, that they wouldn't be task force members then, they would be somebody invited in to talk.
We designed, the recommended design is only resident as filling these positions.
So to my comment, Linda, if we don't have anybody apply, then we will be reaching out to those locations, establishments, and local Waunakee people to try to get them to participate in the study. That would be our best option, Waunakee people, correct.
Are these meetings likely to, I assume they would be noticed and everything, since there will always be two members, it wouldn't take a whole lot for there to be quorum of the board there, so.
If
Yeah.
you sit on other committees too, you'll notice that the agenda at the bottom
Sure.
has the language that says a majority of the board members could attend.
Yep, just wanted to make sure.
Same thing. All rules apply, just like any other committee. Any other comments? Okay, so then we need to identify, basically, we've identified the task. Is everybody good with the task that we've identified? Okay, so do we need to make a motion on that, or just
You could, I would just lump it all together as one
one
motion.
motion for all of it? Okay. The composition of the task force, so we're gonna add a
EMS, or emergency management.
Emergency management individual, and we're gonna keep the 17 to 21 in that category, and they're going to be Waunakee residents. Okay, everybody good with that at this point, or any changes? And then assign village administrator to take necessary steps to coordinate.
Administration.
Village administration to take necessary steps to coordinate and complete the study by providing staff support and guidance to the task force and UW Extension Consulting Team. So that's basically our staff assisting.
I'd clarify that we're not voting members. We're there to help, participate, serve, facilitate.
Okay, so if everybody's good with those things, then we need a motion to approve these.
Okay, move to approve the task to be completed by the Waunakee Housing Task Force and the composition of the task force, as we have discussed, and to assign village administration to take necessary steps to coordinate and complete the study by providing staff support and guidance to the task force and the UW Extension Consulting Team.
Okay, motion by Phil Willems. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Bill Ranum. Any other comments?
Just that the priority now is please help us get this message out to citizens. We're looking forward to having interested applicants apply, and then, again, tapping shoulders as appropriate makes a ton of sense in this instance, too, so we can get a good cross-section.
Okay,
I would assume if you don't get enough people, you could just push it back a month or.
That's what we'd have to do.
okay, then I will call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. Next, we have, under old business, discuss and take action on a rezone request from Stephen and Ronald Kelcher. We did this already, didn't we?
No.
No?
No, this is different.
Rezone, oh yeah, 5511 Easy Street, Town of Westport, for proposed new lots. This is the one we had open. Or left open from last meeting. From County A1 EX Agricultural District to Village ER1 Estate Residential District and Con Conservancy District.
Recommend approval as recommended by the Joint Planning Commission. This one's
Okay,
pretty
we
easy.
were waiting on that, correct?
Yeah, we were waiting on the publication requirement.
I'll make a motion to
Oh,
approve.
you still have the
You
public
guys still
hearing
have to have a
open, though.
public hearing.
Okay. So is there anybody here that would like to address us on this issue? Okay, then I'm gonna close the public hearing.
I'll make
Sam?
the motion to approve the rezone request as stated.
Motion by Sam Bowick.
Second.
Second by Sue Springman. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we've got discuss and take action on Forward Development Group request for TIF participation in Woodland Crest Development. We'll be doing this in open session, and then we'll go into closed session afterwards.
Yeah, we have a representative from FDG here to provide you with a presentation. The item that they submitted has been provided in the packet, in the public packet, so the village board has seen that. You're welcome, Dan, to reference that as you like.
Thank you, Todd. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan O'Callahan. I'm a representative of Forward Development Group. So we did submit a letter of interest for TIF back in February for this project. This is the Woodland Crest development. We've been here several times. We've visited with the Plan Commission several times over the past few months. We think we've got a very exciting project. Just to quickly recap what that project is. It's about a 30-acre development on Highway Q. It's what we call a village neighborhood center. It's a mixture of uses, some retail uses, some restaurant uses, some multifamily housing, some senior housing, all of which is anchored by a roughly 50,000 square foot Hy-Vee grocery store. The total project value that we're projecting after about a 6 to 7 year build out is about $45 million of new tax base here in the village. Again, that's over 6 to 7 years of build out. So $45 million of total new tax base in the village. That would generate roughly $1 million of new property taxes after full build out. So it's that, that new tax increment that's the subject of our TIF request. We provided some more detailed numbers, but just very roughly, the project is about a $13 million, $12.8 million project to develop in terms of putting in all the infrastructure, acquiring the land, doing all the development work up front, about $12.8 million. And if you look at the sales value of those lots on which all of those, that mixture of uses I just described will be developed, the value of that, that land is about $9.1 million. So it doesn't take a financial genius to see that the back of the envelope math here doesn't work. It costs more to develop this project, put in the infrastructure, and do that work than the market value of the resulting saleable lots. So there's roughly a $4 million gap in that analysis. So it's this tax increment financing tool that we're asking the village to consider. We think this is a very worthwhile project. It's consistent with the village's comprehensive plan, something the community has long sought for this area. We think there are tremendous benefits to the village and its residents in terms of the new retail offerings at the site, some new housing opportunities, senior housing opportunities. So a lot of potential value, not to mention the long-term impact here, which is to grow the village's tax base, again, to the point where this 30-acre property would be generating, for the long term, sustainably, about $1 million of new tax, property taxes every year. So about $12.8 million to develop, about $9 million of value for those saleable lots. We've got a gap in the pro forma. We're asking the village to consider a $4 million TIF financing for this. That would be part of the capital stack used to develop the project. So we've got in that handout that Todd referenced, a one-page summary of the project costs and the sources of funds. And there's 4 or 5 pages of detailed engineering estimates for the cost of the infrastructure, the streets, the sewers, the other utilities, the grading, all of the project costs that we would use the TIF to pay for are in this latest update. Again, we had this letter of intent back in February, but we have done a lot of work with staff and the village's consultants over the last few months. We've met with the Plan Commission. We've talked about what the requirements would be for developing the site. There have been some new components added to the project that have added some cost, quite frankly. Signals at Woodland Crest and Simon Crest Way, for example. And while that's a cost, we also think that's a benefit to the village. Increases pedestrian safety, especially students from the school coming across. There are some other improvements, lane improvements to Woodland that have some benefit to the village. There's infrastructure going in here that will benefit other properties in the vicinity. So lots of benefits to the project and lots of reasons to consider using this economic development tool. We know that it's a very important consideration, not one that you take lightly, and that there's been a great deal of debate and scrutiny on other TIF projects in the village, and we would expect nothing less for this project as well. So we know there's going to be a healthy discussion on this. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Again, we've got these numbers in your packet right now. If the board felt that there was something here that is worth pursuing, we anticipate that you'd engage your financial consultants, whether that be Ellers or someone else, and that we would provide additional financial numbers for them to review and vet.
Okay.
You said that was about 50 acres?
No, it's 28 acres, roughly.
Even worse. Land acquisition, 7 million?
The number that's in your packet is inclusive of land acquisition, also some other development costs, entitlement fees, other reimbursements to the village.
Because that's like 300,000 an acre. That's a pretty big number.
Right. So there's a lot that's in that acquisition and development number. And again, we'd be happy to provide your consultants with our confidential information, including copies of our sales contracts and things like that, to be reviewed if the village thought it was worthwhile to pursue this. Obviously, we realize that we're asking for the village to use its economic development tools, and that you would expect to see, in full transparency, all of our financials, and we would be willing to share that.
So I've been a resident almost 50 years now. Just turned 49 last week. Not that I want to have anybody say happy birthday, but I'm almost 50 at this point. And I think another grocery store for the village is a good thing. It would be a very good thing. I think that Piggly Wiggly's done very well here as well. They're good. They've done very well for our community for many, many years. I remember back having 2 grocery stores forever, and we haven't had that luxury for some time. As a member of the Plan Commission, we have reviewed a lot of different proposals in Hy-Vee coming here to Waunakee, and there's still going to be some changes that are made, moving forward in this process. I'm supportive, though, of what I've seen with the Hy-Vee proposal at this point. Tonight, though, we're talking about Forward Development's request for TIF assistance. And I have a few questions that I'd like to get answered. My focus is on your cash flow forecast, which is page 132 of our packet. You've got $7,365,000 identified as cost for acquisition, entitlements, and municipal fees. I want to drill down on what each of these costs are, unless you have the detail in your proposal. If it's here, please point to it.
I don't have the detailed breakdown of that. Again, we would expect that we would be required to share that, and we'd like to do that in a confidential setting with your financial consultant if you would decide to move forward with the consideration of this.
Okay.
So it's a number that includes various different categories of cost.
Okay, so with
Obviously,
that,
the largest category of that is land acquisition.
yeah, so of the 7.3 million, how much of that cost is acquiring the land for the development?
The majority of it.
Okay.
Maybe I could ask another way to pry into this slightly differently, Dan. In a project like this, if it were to be considered typical, that category by percentage breaks out how? Or is there no typical?
I don't know that there's a typical. Sometimes you'll have a developer who's been holding the land for a long period of time, and so they won't have a large land acquisition cost, but they may have other costs.
Okay,
So there's
no
really
typical.
no typical.
Okay.
And I would love to, in this open format, provide you to the penny all of the answers to the questions you're asking. We are subject to some confidentiality covenants in our agreements, so I'm limited by that. But again, if this is a project the village board feels has merit and you're willing to consider moving forward with, we would expect that in a more confidential setting, we would disclose that to your consultants who could verify those costs. We would understand that you would want to ensure that all of our costs were reflective of fair market values, that the engineering costs are accurate, that we're not overpaying for work done. We're very confident in these numbers, but we understand that it would be your fiscal and fiduciary responsibility to ensure that these are accurate.
Okay. Are there costs included in the acquisition that do not pertain to per acre cost of acquiring the land?
Yes.
What are the acquisition costs that do not pertain per acre cost?
Some of the special assessments, the municipal and permitting fees are in there.
Okay.
Again, the majority is land acquisition.
For park fees in here,
Park fees,
if you have multifamily, there's
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if park fees are part of that.
I'm guessing you factor those in. We already shared that info with you.
Yes.
So I bet that's in there.
So can you explain what you mean by entitlements and how much of the 7.3 million costs pertain to entitlements? And how did you come up with the estimate?
I don't have the detailed breakdown of that. And unfortunately, our CFO, Ron Henshu, is delayed in traffic. I was getting texts from him with his, update. He may be here any moment and may have some more information on the detailed breakdown of that he could share. I sense that you're very eager to get to the underlying land acquisition cost. And again, we have some covenants with the seller that require us to contain that discussion to a closed session discussion with the village board for competitive and bargaining reasons.
Okay.
So we would share that.
You've got $4,071,000 identified as cost for construction of streets and related infrastructure.
Yes.
Are all of the costs associated with infrastructure internal to the development?
No, so the signals at Woodland Crest and Sound Crest Way, for example, would be not contained within the boundaries of the property itself. There are some improvements on Highway Q. There are some other lane improvements on Woodland Crest, some other infrastructure, utilities that are not within the boundaries. Obviously, these all, to some degree, relate to and benefit the property and the development and are required as part of it.
Okay, so what are the estimated costs of the projects that identified as not internal? Do we have that?
So we tried to provide a breakdown by category. So if you look at this hard cost detail, it's the 4 or 5 page spreadsheet. The right-hand column is the County Q improvements. The next column to the left is the Peaceful Valley costs, then the Woodland Drive costs, storm quantities, storm costs, and then the subdivision costs, those being on the property.
Okay, and the last question is just, you have $240,000 identified as operational costs. What are those costs?
Consulting fees, legal fees, ongoing development fees. There's a 5-year sort of project horizon here, 5 to 6 years. So funding the development work, the other soft costs and development work as the project continues for 5 or 6 years.
Those are mine. Any other questions for board members? For Dan?
Are we going into closed session?
Just if you have any questions before we go into closed
Oh,
session.
no, and I assume we'll get more detail later, right?
Okay. Joe, any questions? Sam? Bill? Bill?
No, I think I'm asked the ones that I was.
Aaron?
I know.
Okay.
Actually, I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Timeframe, because of the Hy-Vee discussion that's been had, what is the schedule you had desired?
The schedule we had initially laid out and discussed with village staff would have had us starting construction late summer, early fall. We're a little behind that. We would hope to be under construction on at least some portion of the project this fall, but more likely the majority of the work is 2019.
Okay. Any other questions?
And that specifically is for development of pad-ready property, right? You're not talking
utilities,
Hy-Vee
yes.
open and operating or any other user for that matter.
That's a good clarification. That's correct. It'd be the development of the site, installation of the streets and utilities in 2019, with construction of some of the uses to begin shortly thereafter.
Assuming all of this came together, when would Hy-Vee be open?
A store that size would have I'm looking at our engineer in the back, an 18-month construction horizon. So it would not be a 2019 store opening, would be beyond that. And, on the topic of Hy-Vee, I guess I would just end with this. There had been some concern at some of the meetings we attended in the past about the village being careful not to subsidize development. We understand that concern, and we want to assure the village that Hy-Vee is paying a fair market value for its land. So this is not a subsidy of a lot for Hy-Vee to build a grocery store. They are under contract to pay what's been determined to be a fair market value for the 10-acre parcel that they would purchase and build their store on. They will pay full value for the construction. They'll pay their employees prevailing wages in the market. So this is not a subsidy of a competing grocery store in the village. This is a request to fund infrastructure on a 30-acre development site that is proving quite challenging to develop. We've been looking at this project for a number of years, tried a couple of different iterations, we've been here before, and it's costly to develop in terms of the infrastructure required.
I guess that begs one more question, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Which is, you're selling all the lots or some leasebacks for land?
The plan is to sell them all.
And so if you're the developer and you're guaranteeing the increment, you gotta make sure that the values of all the developments that occur, like
That's correct,
the
yes.
Park Store situation, are there.
We haven't gotten into those details yet, but we have had preliminary conversations with
But you
village staff, and we recognize that
Guarantee them, right?
the village would expect, we anticipate that the village would want to see this as a pay-as-you-go or developer-funded TIF rather than a more traditional, the village does the borrowing, which you don't do, we're aware of that. And so this would be a developer-funded TIF where it would be on us to borrow all of the costs up front, and then if and only if the project generates the roughly $1 million of increment that we think it will that increment be available to pay back the borrowing. And if that increment is not there, if we're not successful at our jobs, then we have a guarantee where we're making up the shortfall. That's what we expect.
Yes.
Clarification on what, you made a statement a short bit ago that the site's particularly expensive to develop because of the exorbitant infrastructure costs. Now, as I consider the plan that the Plan Commission has reviewed, what I see there is something not far off from typical.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to ask the question, is in truth the exorbitant cost more attributable to the land price versus the infrastructure expected?
To be clear, I don't want to suggest that these costs of infrastructure are beyond typical costs. These are, utilities, pipes, pavement, curb and gutter. So it's, been estimated at a market rate. The site's a little challenging given its topography and some of the stormwater requirements for the site. But you're right, these are costs that other developments are also required to bear. And the village has seen fit in other instances to use its TIF economic development tool. So when you add up all of these costs, the land acquisition, the infrastructure, and you get to that $12.8 million total project budget, and then you compare that against what you have in terms of saleable land, once all that infrastructure is in at around $9 million, that's where the gap is. So I don't want to pretend that these are exorbitant or extraordinary costs. These are the sorts of costs that many developers come to you in their TIF applications seeking this TIF financing to help pay for.
Yeah, I guess my point is important, that the village isn't throwing these infrastructure curveballs at the developer in the way that might scare them away, being unusual.
No, not at all. And to be very complimentary of your staff, we've been meeting with them for I guess the better part of 8 months now. And from day one, they've always been very clear in the village's expectations for development of the site and the cost of infrastructure, the quality of development that the village would expect to see. We think we're demonstrating that in for instance, the Hy-Vee building plans that have come forward. We'd hope to achieve that high quality that the village is looking for. That was perhaps one of the first things Todd said to us when we sat down in his office, that the village is going to expect high quality development. This is on a major gateway corridor into the village, and the village of Waunakee tends to be patient. So if this isn't going to work, then we're not in a rush to make it work. We hope you feel that we've also been patient with our approach. We think we've got a great project, and we hope that you'll give the TIF application consideration.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we're going to go back to Octopi. from earlier in there, discuss and take action on amendment to occupied development agreements. We're going to close session for that right away, correct?
We are. I would note that the packet included an explanation with a couple letters from Occupy's Bank and WEDC, which in the end, what the request is a modification to their development, the structure of the financing that they are looking for us to help with. So that's the nature of the discussion we'd have in closed session.
Okay, so I need to read.
I would do both, yeah. And then 2 separate votes.
Okay, so this is for discuss and take action on amendment to occupied development agreement. The village board may convene in closed session as authorized by Wisconsin statute 19.851E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. The village board may reconvene in open session to discuss and take action on the subject matter discussed in closed section. So I would look for a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Motion by Phil. Second by Bill Ranum. Julie, roll call vote?
Joe Zitzelsberger. Sam Ballwick.
Yes.
Sue Springman.
Yes.
Bill Ranum.
Yes.
Chris Zellner.
Yes.
Bill Willems.
Yes.
Aaron Moran.
Okay, then we've got discuss and take action on forward development group request for TIF participation within the Crest Development. The village board may convene in closed session as authorized Wisconsin statute 19.851E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. The village board may reconvene in open session to discuss and take action on the subject matter discussed in closed session. So I'd look for a motion again.
So moved.
Motion by Phil Williams. Second by Bill Ranum. Julie?
Aaron Moran.
Yes.
Phil Willems.
Yes.
Chris Zellner.
Yes.
Bill Ranum.
Yes.
Sue Springman. Sam Ballwick.
Yes.
Joe Zitzelsberger.